Did she say what kind of animal it was that attacked her?
So yeah, they're saying it's some type of animal attack. Statistically, there's been more animal attacks, mysterious deaths, people gone missing.
In other news, local authorities remain perplexed by the animal attacks.
What attacked you in the woods?
An animal. What else could it have been?
Welcome to It Was an Animal Attack. I'm Sandile.
And I'm Fadzai.
And we are two friends through the power of the internet and other nerdy media and TV superfans who are deciding to start a podcast about some of the supernatural drama series of the 22 episode era television, one that is slowly being lost to history. We want to be talking about shows about basically anything supernatural, vampires, wolves, witches, anything that goes bump in the night, essentially. But yeah, I think actually it's kind of funny, the way we met Fadzai was through Twitter in 2021?
I think technically we were already following each other in 2020, but we barely interacted until 2021.
Right, in 2021 when, truly just bored out of my mind, decided to read a bunch of old stories I wrote on Spaces, and you came listening in, and through a shared love of the supernatural, I think that really facilitated what is now a long-standing friendship.
Yes, indeed.
So we're hoping to do this show discussing different supernatural series each season, starting with what I would say is the blueprint, at least for the 2010s era, of supernatural drama at large. And that is The Vampire Diaries, which is a show, if you were living under a rock in that time, or if you were born after that time, I shudder to think, was a show that ran from 2009 to 2017, about 8 seasons, focusing on a young woman, Elena Gilbert, who becomes embroiled in the affairs of 2 vampire brothers, the Salvatores, Stefan and Damon. There are diaries kept for some time. That does cease to be as important as the show progresses. And yeah, it lasted for 8 seasons. It was on the CW. It was pretty iconic for a while, and then like most shows that run long, kind of takes a bit of a dive. But it really sort of drove pop culture. I think to date, I would say, it's still such an impactful story, impactful characters, impactful in the genre at large. But yeah, Fadzai, your origin with Vampire Diaries, if you can remember, if we can cast our minds back roughly a decade and a half as to when you sort of jumped on to the show.
I actually remember exactly when I found out Vampire Diaries existed. I was living in Australia and it was being advertised a lot. I think season 2, was about to drop. And I hadn't heard of it before then, but it was in the midst of the Twilight craze. And in my head, I was just like, oh, this is a Twilight ripoff TV show. I'm not interested in this. I don't want to see it, because I was slowly getting over Twilight. And then a year later, when I returned to South Africa, I happened to stumble across an episode near the end of season 2, and I was hooked. I became obsessed with that show. I was like, I was wrong. I should have given you a chance. I take it all back.
That's funny you say end of season 2, because I know I've told this to you, but I didn't know that about you, is that I also jumped in with the finale of season 2.
I wasn't quite all the way at the end. You were on the last episode, right? The very last episode of season 2.
Strange place to start.
The dust is settling from the previous 21 episodes, and they're revving up a new stuff for the next season, and you're like, okay, this is happening.
Truly just hitting the ground running, taking everything in stride. Although, so I was aware of the show for some time, but I had a pretty sheltered childhood, so I wasn't watching a lot of things that were just on television when I got home from school or being watched by my parents. But I had read 2 of the books, The Vampire Diaries by L.J. Smith, when I was in, it must have been either late primary or early high school. I didn't think much of it afterwards because I was just reading whatever was around, and I do remember enjoying the books. And then when the show came out, in the back of my mind, I sort of made that connection. And then, like I said, very last episode of season 2 was airing, I think live. I think the week afterwards is when all my friends were watching it. And that's when I jumped on, because my best friend was watching it. And I was in ever since. I went pretty much like 5 seasons, like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, before I actually went back and watched the first 2 seasons when I started showing the show to my sisters. Would you agree in terms of the show had that driving fact, or would you? Because I know you have opinions concerning an earlier show, which I concede is probably like a more a better progenitor for like the entire 21st century.
Which show are you alluding to?
Which other show would I be alluding to with supernatural creatures?
I would say for the 2010s CW vibe that we're all quite familiar with, Vampire Diaries was probably, the OG. There had been supernatural shows before, but they weren't really in the vein of what we became familiar with in that decade.
Yeah, no, fully agree. So our goal with the show is to kind of focus on the characters of the show, who are inarguably what make those sorts of shows iconic, right? For as much as the narrative and the vibes of them are cool, a lot of these long running shows, the story will more often than not kind of waffle, and you really stick around just to like hang out with the characters. So we're going to be focusing on, in the theme of 22 episodes, we're going to be focusing on 22 of like the core characters. We shot for highest build, but naturally we ran into issues with that. There's certain characters who have a lot of episodes but aren't super pivotal. There's certain characters who don't have a lot of episodes but are like, that season they were the locus of the plot. They were the most iconic. We're not going to stick strictly to top 22 build. We're going to play around a bit. We're going to try and do a character in episode. It's not going to be in order of importance because that would be a bit too predictable, and we kind of want to decide as we go who we're talking about. And then, of course, in between episodes, if we feel like discussing a character that was more minor but just kind of lives in our hearts, we'll probably do that. If there's aspects of the world that we want to dive into, because I mean, again, writing a show for 8 seasons, there's a lot of inconsistency.
Oh,
A lot of
yes.
varying lore. It's just fun to kind of get into and hash out exactly what's going on in these worlds. We'll probably do that as well. Yeah, for as long as we go with this first quote season, we'll be talking about Vampire Diaries, but if we run any longer than that, we're hoping to get to other shows in the future. We'll keep that a bit mum for now, though, just so we can build the excitement. But if that's something you're interested in, then stick around, follow this podcast, I suppose, wherever you're listening to it. And if there are already episodes listed, then jump right in. It should be a lot of fun. You can email us, because we have an email address, animalattackpod@gmail.com, or you can find us on Twitter at animattackpod. That's ANIM Attack Pod. You'll also see our link tree in the bio of that. You can basically find everything related to us on the internet. Otherwise, anything to say, Fadzai, before you roll out?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, well, we will see you in the next episode. Cheers, everyone.